You're listening to another ambitious Entrepreneur Network.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to the Christian Entrepreneurs Podcast, daily conversations with Christian entrepreneurs to inspire and empower Christian business owners to walk strongly in their faith, while build a thriving business that honors Him in every way. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
And welcome to another episode of the Christian Entrepreneurs Podcast. This is episode 41, and I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross, the podcasting queen. Now, on today's show, I'm joined by Samantha Jansen, and she is on a mission to help business owners and change makers become influential leaders by using social media and through self-publishing. Now, on today's show, Samantha is going to share the power of self-belief and following your plan despite the challenges that can pop up. She's also going to be talking about business planning and knowing your boundaries, as well as the importance of having honest conversations and taking ownership of your mistakes so that you can learn from them, and so much more. So welcome to the show, Samantha.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited and looking forward to sharing with the community some interesting things that I've learned along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for those people who do follow you on social media, know that you are everywhere. You're often sharing lots of great posts, lots of great information, and really walking the talk. And so let's just take people back to the journey that saw you now with the business that you have got. Is it something that you've always thought you'd love to do, or have you found that God really has led you down a path with different circumstances, different experiences that have now culminated in you helping people self-publish and also in social media? What was it for you?
Well, for me, it was a very interesting journey. I actually didn't set out to have the two businesses that I do have today. So there was a series of events in my personal life that took me to a crossroad about 5.5 years ago when I was pregnant with my second child. And I was working the 9-to-5 job, and I was at a crossroad because my partner left, and I was with a 3-year-old and a baby on the way. And that was actually, I suppose, growing up in a Christian environment, all throughout my childhood, Christian schooling back in Sri Lanka, because I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and all throughout my, teenage years, young adult, the Christian belief and faith was always there. And then, there I was, and I was challenged well and truly out of my comfort zone. And I suppose I really, my belief system was sort of reignited, and I really had to take a check-in on where I stood with my relationship with God and my faith. There were moments of, trials and, a lot of tears going, God, are you really listening? Because I'm not sure where I'm at. But on the other side, if I was to fast track a little bit, it was purely, with all honesty, I can say it was my faith that kept me going through that really rough, probably 6 to 9 months. And at the back of that is where I got this brilliant idea to start a business, but it was actually not Platform for Success or Samantha Jansen. I literally first started an online retail store selling clothes online. And then within about 6 months, I actually shifted course and Platform for Success was born. So I strongly believe that at that time, I was at a place where I was just saying, here I am. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Give me a sign. Literally, that was like the daily thing that I was saying, because I just was really confused with a lot of emotions, as you can imagine. But also really confused and kind of going, but God, are you there? Are you listening? Kind of thing. And looking back, 5.5 years on, 2 businesses, and there are still challenges as business owners that we face. But I think the learning from that big chunk, that big 6 to 9 months time frame really reconfirmed my faith, but also really put things into perspective as a human being. What did I stand for? What was my purpose, and how I was going to lead my life into the future? So, as I said, Platform for Success was not the starting point, but it was where I found my purpose through a series of mentors and courses and, really investing in myself and taking a good hard look at myself, what do I see in the mirror, but what do I really stand for? There was a slight disconnect with that. So I had to own that.
I mean, obviously, anyone that finds himself in a situation that really is challenging from a personal level can really, as you said, question, okay, what's going on for me? But in hindsight is a wonderful teacher. And I guess looking back, there are, through leaning in and really reconnecting and recognizing the strengths that you probably didn't know that you had, and courageousness and a lot of other characteristics and approaches and attitudes, which, as we know, is just so very important in business. Because as we know, in businesses, there are challenges that come up, and how we face them, how we tackle them, and where we really go for again, leaning into him and getting insights and what do I do now, I think is really something that, for me, and from what I'm hearing from a lot of guests, that's at the center of what they do. Is that for you too?
Oh, definitely. It was one of those things, because I think I had never, ever been challenged before to that degree. So I suppose that, my relationship, with God every single day, it was, it was there every single day. And then when you're at the crossroad, it was like, okay, now what? Like, seriously, what do I do now? But then all these other, I think, regardless of whether you are Christian or not, those human feelings that come in with emotions, with anger, with frustration, then faith is there. And then there's this other set of emotions, and you're at a crossroad battling it out as a human being going, okay, well, I'm here now. What do I do with it? So I had to really take an account of that. And as you said, lean in and go, okay, where to now? How do I get past this? Because, he is there guiding me, but am I actually tuning into that? Or have I got other emotions that are clouding that? And, I'm stepping onto a different course suddenly just because I've got so much emotion. So, yeah.
Great insights. So let's talk about the power of self-belief and following your plan despite the challenges. As we said, sometimes external factors and even internal factors, our mindset, and that's driven by our beliefs, can have us doubt, can have us become discouraged. So what did you learn, and what are some insights that you can share around this today for people?
Definitely. So it started off with, as business owners, sometimes we go to these amazing inspirational talks that are held across Australia and, globally, essentially, with some amazing speakers. And I started to immerse myself into that side of things, going and listening to people of inspiration, listening to people that had done business very successfully, and were giving me almost a blueprint of how I should do things. So I started going to a lot of these, and essentially one of the key things that stood out for me, the importance of having a purpose and knowing that purpose really well and being aligned to that. So really tapping into that, who are you, what do you stand for, and then finding a business that, marries into that. So really aligned to that. And that was essentially where I discovered that online clothing business wasn't for me. It was more for fascination rather than a long-term plan that was aligned to me. So I soon discovered, probably about 6 months into having that online business, that my purpose was very much to inspire and educate people and support them, because that was what, me as a human being stood for. I was very driven and passionate about that, and obviously just fascinated with the clothes and the fashion and all that sort of things. So that was just, that was going to get me through maybe a few years, give or take, and then the passion would eventually kind of, frizzle away, and it was not long term. And this particular coach that I saw, and I ended up signing up to one of his programs, he spoke about the importance of planning, and not just planning for the week, the month, the quarter. It was long term. So what do you want to achieve in 5 years, and then backtrack that? So what's the 5-year goal? Where do you see that? Can you visually see that? And when these questions were thrown to me through the one-on-one consulting, through the workshops that they had, I started to go, okay, I actually can see myself visually in that environment. That exercise that they say, can you hear things? Can you smell it? Can you picture yourself there? And I started to really immerse myself in that visualization process, and then started to back plan. So, okay, 5 years, I want to achieve this. 3 years, where would I want to see myself? And then that back planning. And now I say to someone whenever I meet them, whether it's at a networking event, whether they come to one of my workshops, or we just, communicate as a prospective client, I say planning is key. Without a plan, there is no direction. There is no, where am I going? You know, when we jump in the car, we do know where we're going most of the time, unless we're like, okay, let's see where we go on Sunday for a drive. Generally, we have a plan. Okay, we're going to use this road and we're planning on getting to that suburb or that destination. So one of the key things for me was really understanding what is that big picture and then backtracking that. I like to reverse engineer things for me personally. So that planning process really helps cement that and then breaking it into actionable tasks. So you have a big plan, then you have a yearly plan, quarterly plan, monthly plan, and then, you know, your weekly plan and your daily little task.
Yes.
And if I could give a hot tip, it would be don't have more than 3 tasks a day, because, you know, we still have to do business, we still have to live life, we have to sleep, eat, drink, all those things. So 3 fairly good sized tasks would actually keep us going, as opposed to having 10 tasks on that to-do list that never gets done. So 3 is the golden number for me, and that's what I love to share.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes we can put far too many things on the to-do list from different activities. I mean, as before we hit record, I mentioned to you, I've got 5 interviews today, but they're using the same skills. Everything's set up. So I just need to show up and there I go. But one of the things in planning, and I want you to speak a little bit towards this too, is that sometimes we can be really clear in the plan, but then we can go off plan by not having strong boundaries. Talk about this, knowing our boundaries and then sticking to them.
Yes, and that was, again, I suppose I was challenged a lot around that, because I did come from a corporate background where I worked for 9 years. And, you know, there are some tasks. Generally, when you work a 9 to 5, there's pressures on, there's KPIs we need to meet as an organization. And one of the things that I suppose, with all honesty, that I didn't master was my boundaries. I would just say, okay, you know, this is my job description, I've got to do this. I'll say yes, yes, yes. And I was way over my head. But, you know, probably about, I think, if I was to backtrack, maybe about 3.5 years ago, I really understood the power of being able to say no to things that were not going to serve the purpose or the plan. So, for example, if someone said to me, I really think you should come along to this networking event, Samantha, it would be really awesome, you know, I think it would be really beneficial, you know, for you. I would have to look at, what have I got on for the day? You know, what have I got on for the week? And how much energy and time are those things going to take? And then kind of assess, is this something I want to push myself to do because it might be an awesome opportunity? Or am I just trying to squeeze too much into a day, which at the end of the day, I feel exhausted. And I'm like, you know, when you're too tired to sleep or you're too tired to even unwind. So I started to take account that I was throwing myself a little too many tasks in terms of boundaries of saying yes to things that were not long-term orientated. So now what I do is I have a schedule. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. But I do have in a day always like a 2-hour buffer. And I don't share that openly enough, purely because I don't want people to go, okay, that she has always a 2-hour buffer in her day. But with all honesty and transparency, I do have a 2-hour buffer. Now, this 2-hour buffer is not a chunk, but it's scattered across things. So meaning, for example, you know, I'm on this now, but then when I finish, there's a 20-minute window to do whatever I need to do, whether that's go to the toilet or, you know, get some food or whatever it is. And I'm not running things back to back, because I found by running that back to back, I was cutting it really, you know, close, but also there was a level of exhaustion that I was physically feeling at the end of the day. And I do have 2 young primary school children. So I wanted to make sure that I was, you know, embracing both from an equal balance. So business as well as parenting as well, just so that I'm, you know, in a 100% headspace in both elements, as opposed to being fully there for one. And then, you know, when I get home and I'm a parent, I'm kind of in like, oh, whatever goes. Like, that was not me, because my values are very equal around my family and my business. So that was taking account of that. And I think having that buffer is really good, because then you have some boundaries and be okay with saying no. Like, there are so many times where I say to someone, sorry, cannot chat right now. Let's do this tomorrow. And I'm okay with that. You know, it's, you know, I've had the odd question where people go, is that a bit of ego talking, Samantha, a little bit of arrogance? And I said, well, I don't look at it as that. It's not ego, because I'm taking a check-in. I have a very high level of self-conscious, I would say. So it is not ego talking. It's just going, I have to honor myself from a physical and an emotional level. And sometimes I need to schedule that for the next day, so that I'm going to be 100% when I talk to that person, but I'm also not, you know, spreading myself too thin. So, the 2-hour buffer.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think as you're sharing that, it's a huge lesson for all of us. And I have to say that I've done something similar over the last month since I've started doing these daily podcasts, as well as my other ones.
Yeah.
It has really knocked me back when I don't stand firm for my boundaries. So I have had to go through my diary and go, there's things that I have previously said yes to that I just cannot do, because of the fact that otherwise I know that I will just be like a zombie on the couch, and that's not good to anybody. Speak a little bit about how to have conversations. The reason I say that is for many of the listeners and viewers today, they are service-based business owners.
Yeah.
They are very heart-centered, purpose-driven. Saying no can take a level of courage that they may not necessarily have used before, because they don't want to disappoint. But I think what you were saying, it's important, because if we don't look after ourselves and maintain the monitor on our energy, we're just not going to be good for our clients. So how did you go about having that conversation?
That was again another learning, and to be honest, I actually invested in a life coach probably about 18 months ago, just because I think when you're on a journey of self-discovery, but also in the business entrepreneur world, it's important to take a check-in when stuff comes up in your personal life. And there were a few things that were coming up, with all honesty, in my personal life around some conversations within my inner circle. So purely with my children's dad and also with my mum, where sometimes I was expecting too much of them of their help, and things were coming up, and I needed to take a look at how I was communicating to them. What I thought I was saying in my head was not necessarily the words that were coming out, and there was a slight disconnect with that. So I did invest in getting myself a life coach to help me work through some stuff that was going on internally in terms of what my expectations were, but also my languaging, particularly to these two people, because they're two key people in my life that, help in behind the scenes so I can do what I have to do. And one of the things I realized was I was not really understanding where they were coming from. So I was always in sort of, let me just say what I have to say. This is, I'm a very direct person. I'm just going to say it, and, you got to work it out. That was a bit of my attitude, which wasn't ideal. It clearly wasn't serving me on the long term. And what I learned was to take a check-in and ask them, where are you at? How are you feeling? And so that I know then to frame the sentence depending on how they're at in that moment. Now, sometimes it could work in my favor, sometimes it wouldn't, because if they're having a really bad day, nothing I say would go. But it gave me an insight not to then go, okay, I stuffed up, because sometimes we can self-blame and we can go into shutdown because they're having a bad day, but we haven't realized where that conversation is coming from. So now when I communicate, I try to take a check-in on where people are at, and then be okay with whatever the outcome is, instead of taking it very personally. So for example, like yesterday, someone said to me, I really need to chat to you. Like, we really need to talk. And I said, unfortunately, I can't do that today or tomorrow. This will have to wait till next week. We've got a public holiday on Monday, so we have to wait till next week. If there's something urgent, flick me an email. I'll have a look at it. I had to do that because I knew what was coming up for them was something that was a lot deeper, and it wasn't going to be a 10-minute conversation. It was going to be probably an hour and a half. So really understanding the framework and taking an account, because I think depending on where we are at, at the time of the day, and emotions, past situations, because I remember one life coach once said to me, sometimes, we could be driving and someone could cut in front of us. And, we were listening to our favorite song, and then this happens, and suddenly a influx of emotions come over us, and then we're angry. So when we get off at our next destination, we're already a little bit, agitated on the edge. So someone can tip us over with, put sugar in the coffee or didn't put sugar, and that's enough just to go nuts about it. But really going, hang on, okay, I didn't put the sugar, I didn't get the coffee order. Was it really that, or was there something else triggering it? So I have learned to take a check-in when I'm dealing with people, especially long-term clients, very much around, when I'm talking to them for long periods of time, but also if I'm having, friends and family, communicating with them, really understanding where they're coming from before I just go, this is what I've got to say, so I'm going to say it. Really taking account of that and honoring that space, because sometimes I think they could be in a rough place and going, okay, I get where you're coming from. Maybe we'll leave this for another day. talk about it later, maybe give you some time to just have some downtime and we'll chat about it an hour later or the next day. And that has helped me not that feeling where you feel like, okay, I'm not taking on all of that, because sometimes we can take that on purely because we love them and we want to support them, which isn't ideal long term. So, yeah.
Yes, that you're saying, and I'll just put you on mute because there's a little bit of noise, I think, coming through. Something that you said, and I really want to spend a little bit more time looking at that, because and that was the feedback that you got from people for honouring your time, setting your boundaries, that sometimes because their own boundaries are not that firm and they haven't really gone through the self-awareness and what makes them, be refreshed and so forth, sometimes their leaky boundaries, they impart them on us or impose them on us. And one of the things that as you were sharing that, I was reminded of, the fact that when Jesus was going through his mission and going around preaching and going to different towns, one of the things he always did was to separate himself and spend time in prayer, because for him that was important, and he was not constantly draining of his energy. So we've got a really great role model to follow there. But what would you say to people who may be going through that process, developing the ability to be able to recognize, hang on a minute, this is not my stuff, and I'm not taking responsibility for where they're at? Because often I think we can do that, and you said so beautifully, to be aware that other people's reactions or their own beliefs don't impact me, because we can carry that negative energy around too if we let ourselves. Yes,
definitely, most definitely. It's interesting, as you were saying that, I thought of a conversation I recently had with my daughter. So she goes to a Christian school, and one day we were having a rough conversation and it was just not going anywhere. And then I stopped and I said, Sarah, what do you think Jesus would do in this moment? And she goes, I don't know, I'm really confused and I'm really angry and I don't want to talk to you right now. And that was, because sometimes I try to put it into perspective as a parent, but that was not, quite working. But I think what I would want to share, I'm sorry, I know my device is going a little bit, the headset's going a bit off there. But what I would say is sometimes you just need to give that person the space to walk away from the conversation, because it's not really going to go the direction it's meant to go. And as you said, sometimes, at the end of the day, Jesus needed time out to kind of go sit in prayer and have that. I always try to look at it when something's not quite going the way I thought it would go, look at it and go, maybe I just need time out to reflect on it. So every night I have about 5-10 minutes of reflections from the day, learnings. What did I learn? What did I do well? What did I didn't do so very well? And I have a gratitude journal that I keep, just to be grateful for everything, the challenges and the wins, just because that is a learning process for me on a personal level. But in terms of communication, I think it's very much going, okay, this is not going where I'm at. I'm just going to sit on it, rather than blurt out that influx of emotions that come over. Because, I've been there where I feel like, they're not listening to me. They're just not getting me. Let me just go over the top and try to pour out all what I'm feeling and as emotions and anger and frustration, because we feel that, we're not perfect. We all make mistakes. And as much as we believe in Jesus and we have that relationship with God, I think in moments of challenge and trials, the influx of that human nature comes out. And it's kind of going, okay, let me hold on and hang on. Where's this coming from? Do you have a little bit of strength within you to pull back just a little? Not a lot, because I think that's a muscle that needs to be strengthened. So 5 years ago, I did not have that muscle in me. I'll put my hand up and go, that was not me. But 5.5 years on, yes, I'm not 100% there. I'm probably 80% there, and it's just muscle.
Yeah, so strengthening that muscle over and over, really good insights there. Something else that I think is really important as business owners, particularly if we try to do something, a strategy or a tactic, and it doesn't really work out, or maybe it is in the way in which we're dealing with people, like those close around us who are our support mechanisms, is learning from our mistakes. And I really want you to speak a little bit into this, because one of the conversations I had with a previous guest, actually it was, I think, on the Women in Leadership podcast, was she said something, and I think often some people don't recognize this, that we are co-contributors to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And it's so easy when we are in a situation where of struggle, of barriers, of real challenge, that we can often point at other people, point at situations, point at, my Facebook ad didn't work or whatever, even practical things. But it's really important to take a step back and reflect, take ownership of what we've contributed to that, which can be difficult. Have you learned some insights along the way that you can impart in this area too?
Oh, definitely. And look, I again put my hand up there. There has been times where that it's very challenging when things don't go to the plan that you set out to. And I think what I have learned over the time, I actually know through a lot of trial and error, through a lot of challenges, because as I said, I'd be the first to say, yes, 5.5 years on, some things I've done really well and have worked a treat, and then there has been others that have been challenge after challenge after challenge. But also I think as you're growing, sometimes the challenges grow a little bit to test beyond that, just strengthening that again. In terms of challenges and how I look at it, and what if I could share something, would be to really look at what is the hidden message. Now people go, Samantha, that is so like an encrypted thing that you say. Generally with every challenge, there's a 2-part process to it. So there is the part that is in the surface, what we can see right here, right now. And then there's the hidden message, or the thing that if we look one layer beyond, we can see. So often what I say to individuals, it's not what's on the surface, it's what's one step behind. Because it's a bit like, if you've heard that process sometimes in NLP around the mindset, where they talk, what's the why of the why of the why. So why are you late? Well, because of traffic. But why was there traffic? Or because I left home later than that. So it's almost like the layer upon layer. So I would encourage individuals to very much look beyond the surface, or beyond the front end of the challenge, and look at what's one step behind. And that is where the learning happens. I've often found that's the magic. That's the 80% formula of, if you can understand that and tweak that, the front end will clear almost automatically, because you're understanding what is in the base of it. So yeah.
And often what happens is we find ourselves in the same situation because it's within that trigger that if we address that and we learn from that, we can then go from triumph. So, our triggers can often lead us to triumph if we work through them, if we shift through them. Because often in the trigger that's telling us, okay, something is there a belief or an unhelpful belief that needs to be addressed and completely eliminated to something far more empowering. And I think that's such an incredible lesson. Before we end the show, I'd love for you just to share a little bit about the work that you do and how people could get in contact with you.
Yeah, so Samantha Jansen from Samantha Jansen Publishing. So that is all about helping individuals and business owners share their story. I'm very passionate about sharing your story to make a greater impact and become someone of influence. So we're on all social media handles, so Samantha Jansen Publishing. And then in terms of the social media marketing consultancy, very much a Facebook and LinkedIn person. And that is on Platform for Success with the numeric number 4 in there. But yeah, really excited to be on this journey and to really help people become someone of influence and really pursue what it is that they're out to pursue. Because once you figure out who you are and what you stand for and your purpose and mission in life, I think regardless of what challenges come through, as long as you're willing to stay the course, and go, okay, this is what I'm here for, this is what I'm here to deliver, then makes life and business just a little bit easier. The challenges are going to come, but it's all in the mind. So it's easy to stay the course and keep trekking that with faith and really go, okay, this is what I'm serving for a greater good of people. So yeah.
Absolutely. And of course, for all of those people who are listening today, who really do have a faith-based business and wanting to get their message out there, one of the ways to do that and to get that out there on steroids almost is to really leverage social media. It's such a great way. I mean, here we are doing this podcast, we're streaming, it's also done by audio, and then we'll be sending out quotes and things like that. It's a great way to really get the message out there. So all of those details we'll put on the show notes on how you can connect with Samantha, and if self-publishing and getting the message out of your head and into a book is something that you're looking at doing, then certainly I can highly recommend Samantha, because I've known her for many years through various networking groups, and I know many of your clients too have loved the work and working with you. So can highly recommend that. Now, to get access to the show notes, ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/TCE41, ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/TCE41, and we'll pop all of those details. Now, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, of this interview, we did record at the time that we interviewed Samantha. So pop onto those show notes and you can see Samantha share her wisdom via video. One of the things that I'm doing, Samantha, before we finish up the show is just to say a word of prayer for our guests. May I do that for you today too?
I would be so honored and grateful for that. Yes, I would.
All right. Father God, thank you for the opportunity that we could spend today and listen to Samantha's testimony. Lord, sometimes we go through life, personal challenges, business challenges, which just has us throw our hands up and say, you know, what do I do now? But Father, how awesome it is that we can lean into you. You have all of the answers. You love us. You are there to support us. So we're just so thankful that you are there to support Samantha. And now, of course, with her work that she does and the incredible support where she is now supporting other business owners to take their message out. Lord, we just pray for your continued blessing and favor on her business, on her work that she does, the clients that she works with. May they too continue to impact and influence there out in the world, spreading their message and certainly working with their business too. And we ask this all in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Sam, for coming on the show. It's been an absolute delight. And thanks for sharing your testimony today.
Thank you so much for having me. So very grateful for the opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Christian Entrepreneurs Podcast, brought to you by BeTheDifferenceMovement.com. Changing the world one message at a time. Do you feel called to influence real change with your message? Join our supportive community of like-minded influencers, thought leaders, and disruptors at www.BeTheDifferenceMovement.com. That's BeTheDifferenceMovement.com.